Welcome to Book Watch, the podcast where pages meet screens. I'm your host, Sarah-Daye. Each week, I'll be joined by amazing guests to dive deep into the world of adaptations, comparing beloved books with their cinematic counterparts. From faithful retellings to bold reimaginings, we'll break down what worked, what didn't, and what made each adaptation unforgettable. Whether you're a bookworm, a movie buff, or both, you are in the right place. So grab your bookmark, grab your popcorn, and let's watch some books. Welcome back to Book Watch, listeners. I am joined once again with Jordyn, and we are going to be doing part 2 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief, where we dive into the key plot points. Jordyn, thank you for coming back for a second episode.
Happy to be here.
So do you have any thoughts on the general key plot points of the film and the show compared to the book before we dive into each kind of bullet point?
Oh boy, do I. Basically, the movie doesn't follow the book. It very, very, very loosely, in the loosest of terms, does it follow the book. The show is a much better. There are still some things that are a little bit different here and there, but overall, it follows the same beats. And even if we take a different path, we end up at the same spot. So I'm definitely much happier with that version.
And we mentioned last week that we really appreciated the episode titles are chapter titles.
Yes, the chapter titles are so creative and fun and quirky and really give the book and Percy so much character, and like you feel like if a friend was telling you a story. So then a god bought us cheeseburgers and we go on the water ride of death. Like it just feels, it's so Percy and so his character.
Yes.
And so for the show to keep that, obviously a movie can't have chapter titles because there's no chapters or episodes, but for the show to make that choice to include those things means a lot.
Yeah, definitely. So then let's get in. So we start this story with Percy discovering that he's a demigod by his teacher turning into a creature, and Chiron and Grover kind of reveal, that they're in on this. And then they tell Sally that they need to take Percy to Camp Half-Blood. So walk me through how you thought the film adapted that and how the show adapted that.
Yeah, so honestly, the first thing I noticed about the film is the timeline is so squished. The beginning of the story when they're on the field trip at the Met and the teacher turns into a monster and attacks him. That same night, he's going home and talking to his mom and they're going to the cabin. Versus in the book, he goes back to school and he's there through final exams, so at least a couple of weeks, and then he takes a day to get home, and then they go to the beach, and then we're starting to get into Camp Half-Blood. So for the film, again, it's a film, okay, you guys gotta squish down for time, but to go from kind of a public school setting in the city where he can just walk home after school to a boarding school way out in the middle of nowhere, New York, and then him finishing school and taking time to get home on the bus with Grover, like huge difference right off the bat for me, at least.
Yeah. And so we find out we're a demigod and we're going to Camp Half-Blood. We have this whole debacle with not a centaur. What's Minotaur?
The Minotaur. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The number one thing I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the underwear that the Minotaur wears. It is not on the film, but it is in the book and the show.
Yes, that is correct. He wears the Fruit of the Loom tighty whities. That's how they're described in the book. They are in the show and they just disappear in the movie. And that's something that I think, we talked last week about aging up the characters and aging up the story. I think that's something that kind of got lost with that aging up, is that kind of whimsy and like, yeah, the silliness, like in the
Yeah.
moment of terror and oh my gosh, this monster is coming after us, but lol, he's got tidy whities on. Like there,
Yeah.
that moment doesn't happen because we're 16 and we're so serious, and this is so important what we're doing. So it's just things like that, and we talked about like not having Mr. D, like you just lose some of that whimsy and some of that
Yeah.
like lightheartedness that can always be found in hard times and dark times.
Mhm.
um the actual like battle with the Minotaur is pretty consistent across all three adaptations. He breaks off the horn,
Mhm.
he defeats the Minotaur. In the show and the movie, Grover is conscious. In the book, Grover is unconscious,
Mhm.
and Percy is alone battling the Minotaur, and then has to carry Grover over the border, over the boundary into camp, and then he passes out and wakes up a couple days later. So that difference of him and Grover kind of being able to work together to get
Mhm.
to safety versus him having to, again, he could have left Grover behind. He could have just like not continued on, but he's like, no, Grover needs to get to safety. He wanted me to get to safety, so let's go together and do that.
Yeah.
And then
Um,
something
Go
the
ahead.
show added was a little scene between Sally and Grover, and Sally, demanding Grover, swear to me that you'll protect him, swear to me that you'll keep him safe.
Mhm.
That doesn't happen in the book or the movie. And I think that also is like really interesting in the discussion of how Grover's character is a little bit different.
Mhm.
He's a little bit braver. He's not as afraid to fail as he is in the book. And the movie doesn't really touch on it that much, but we've already talked about that. But having that scene where, Sally has faith in him and
Mhm.
you need to take care of my kid, I think is valuable for Grover's character. And again, within the context of the show and, be different, be better, keep moving forwards and just keep making progress is a good scene to have that, she trusts him.
And speaking of Sally, this is also when we lose Sally in the story. She goes to the underworld, and we don't know that right away. We just think we've lost her, but we find out later that he can get her back. So, talk to me about the differences in the three different mediums of
Yeah.
Sally's demise.
Yeah, those are pretty consistent as well. Like in all of them, she gets grabbed by the Minotaur and he starts to, squish her, and then she disappears in a shower of gold.
Mm,
And Percy assumes that she's dead, um, and has to go on processing, that his mom has just died in front of him, and he
right.
can't. What am I going to do now? My mom was the only person in the whole world that understood me, that loved about me, that cared about me, and she's gone. And him having to try to process that. And in the movie, we have a couple minutes interlude between that and when Hades shows up at camp in demon form and is like, I actually stole your mom because you stole the Master Bolt and I want it back.
Uh huh.
Totally random plot change. And so then that's when Percy's like, oh, my mom's alive. I can get her back. I need to go get her back.
Hmm.
And then in the show, there's another new scene for Grover where Grover is, discovers by talking to the Council of Satyrs, Council of Cloven Elders, you know, like, oh, they said that like she might not be dead, she might just be taken. And Mr. D and Chiron are like, yeah, we know, dude. Like, but you can't tell Percy that because otherwise Percy will go get his mom and not do the quest that we want him to do.
Mm,
And Grover has to make that choice of like, do I obey what the adults are telling me or do I stick by my friend and do what I think is right for my friend? And Grover, being that awesome friend that he is, he chooses Percy and he defies Mr. D and Chiron. And that is a departure from book Grover. Book Grover would never. But Grover is deathly afraid of Mr. D, especially. He would never defy a direct order like that.
hmm.
But show Grover does. He is willing to choose Percy over leadership, and he makes that choice. And so that kind of sets Percy also as like, well, okay, I guess I'll do your quest because I can also use that as an opportunity to get my mom.
Mm.
Versus the movie is like, no, I'm just gonna sneak out of camp on my own to go get my mom,
Mhm.
and the quest is like completely an afterthought.
Right. Before we get to the quest and leaving Half Blood, let's talk about his introduction to Camp Half Blood and Capture the Flag, Clarice, Luke, Annabeth, meeting the
Yeah,
bathroom scene, all of that.
yeah. Um, Percy first meets Annabeth when he wakes up and he goes outside and he's like, "Where am I? What's going on?" And she's like, "You drool in your sleep."
Mhm.
That's his first impression of her. And I think, again, keeping in mind that they're 12 years old, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, of course, the first thing she says is, "You drool in your sleep, like, you
Mhm.
loser, like, you goober." Um, versus the movie, the first time he sees her is she's being a total badass and she's sword fighting with all these guys and she's taking them all down and she's like giving him eyes across the field. And he's like,
Mhm.
"Who's that? I want to talk to her." And so different. Their dynamic immediately is not the same. It's not two 12-year
Right.
olds who, sometimes fight, sometimes are friends. Like they just have eyes for each other. Um, and then the show is a lot more faithful to the book. It's very similar where, she's there and, she kind of helps show him around camp and introduces him to people. Um, After the battle in the bathrooms with Clarice. That was something that was interesting is in the book, Annabeth is showing Percy around camp and introducing him to people and they go to the Hermes cabin and they're like, is he a son of Hermes? And she's like, he's unclaimed. Like, oh man, like another one.
Mhm.
Um, and then they bump into Clarice outside and she's like, you know, come here, prissy. Like she's just the bully on campus, and
Right.
she just takes him to the bathroom and he's like, I don't want to get my head stuck in the toilet. And he doesn't consciously, make her stop, but being a son of Poseidon, he, he becomes, what did he say? The god of the plumbing, I think is the title of that chapter. I
Yeah.
become one with the plumbing. And he, gets toilet water sprayed all over Clarice and Annabeth. And that's when Annabeth is like, you've got some sort of power here. I want you on my team for capture the flag.
Mhm.
And in the movie, none of that happens. Clarice doesn't happen. The bathroom scene doesn't happen. Annabeth is against Luke and
Yeah.
Percy in capture the flag,
Mhm.
which totally changes that dynamic as well. Because instead of her showing that she's a child of Athena and her strategy of, okay, Clarice wants revenge on Percy for the bathroom scene, so I'm going to set him up,
Right.
as a decoy, and her demonstrating her intelligence in that way, it's just her attacking Percy for who knows why, just because.
Well,
Um,
yeah, and it's almost like they had because they cut Clarice out, they replaced that with Annabeth and
mhm.
just gave that role of Clarice to Annabeth in the film.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of disappointing because I think first of all, Clarice is a hugely important character in upcoming books,
Mhm.
and so to just erase her is rude. I didn't like it. But then also to like Clarice is mean and she's a bully and she picks on people just because she can. She's a child of Aries. She's just kind of like that. And so to give those kind of attributes to Annabeth, who she's not mean, she's analytical, she's not a bully, she's just practical and willing to make the sacrifice play. She's willing to let Percy be hung out to dry to attract Clarice so that she can win capture the flag, 4 times in a row.
Yeah.
But that's not her like being out to get Percy, it's just strategy, you know. So to give her that like mean streak, I think is a disservice to her as a character, for
Yeah.
sure.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay, so moving on before we get to our quest again, we have to be given the quest. And so Percy
Mhm.
sees the oracle, which is completely cut from the film. There's no
Yeah.
oracle in the film, which they, like you said earlier, they just sneak out of camp because he wants to go save his mom because Hades shows up and says, "I got your mom." So very, very divergent from the book.
Yeah, definitely. And then the show does a good job of sticking closer to the book. He does go up and talk to the oracle. The green smoke is accurate, and the show even gets it right where it is Gabe in the green smoke, delivering that
Right.
message to Percy. It's Gabe's form with the oracle's voice saying, you will go west and find the god who has turned, and giving him the prophecy for this quest. So that was really exciting because, again, having watched the movie and been disappointed, like they cut that whole scene, and that, that's why is it Gabe? Like that, all those, interesting questions that are, that come up in that scene, them just being gone, and then the show doing it right. It was like, oh, this is awesome. It was really cool.
Yeah, yeah. It was fun to see the Oracle scene for sure. Okay, so now we've left Camp Half Blood and we are on our
Mm-hmm.
mission, and this is when it gets really fun because it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like Monster of the Week. Even like the chapters, the episodes,
Yeah.
the movies, not so much because of all the changes that we'll get into. But
Yeah.
the first sort of run in we have is Auntie M's Garden Emporium. Which is our first look at Medusa. And that's what I forgot to mention last week, but I wanted to talk about Uma Thurman, which
Mm-hmm.
was another like Pierce Brosnan. It's Uma Thurman. Like, what are these heavy hitters doing in this film?
Who knows? I mean, Medusa, that whole scene, when I first saw the show, I was not happy with it. I did not like
Hmm.
how it's really different from the book, and I was not happy about it at first. And then going back and rewatching it and sitting in it and having had some time to kind of process it after the fact, I was like, you
Hmm.
know what? They might have gotten that change right. That might have made some sense. Because in the book, they get to Auntie M's and nobody figures it out that it's Medusa until she kind of reveals herself. She takes off her headdress and her coverings, and that's when they are like, oh my gosh, it's Medusa. Like,
Hmm.
run, hide, fight. Um, Versus in the show, Annabeth immediately clocks it. She's like, who do you think Auntie M is with all the stone statues? Like, duh, you guys. And it's like, well, yeah, that actually kind of makes some sense because, especially Annabeth being a daughter of
Hmm.
Athena and grown up in this world since she was 7 years old, of course she's going to be able to recognize these things and figure it out
Right.
quickly. Like, yeah, that, when I think about it, it makes sense. Just
Yeah.
it being different from the book, I was like, no, it's not right. That's not right. And I was like, well, there's some
It's a good
logic here. It
point.
makes sense. Yeah,
Right.
like
And it's
you
almost
got
like
me
you
with that
wonder,
one.
you want to be a fly on the wall in the writing room with Rick and being like, like, is that something fans have brought up with the book in the past? And he's like, yeah,
Hmm.
let's remedy that with the show. Or is that,
Yeah,
how did this change come about?
yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing that's super different in the show compared to both the film and the book is getting more conversation with Medusa about how she became Medusa and
Yes.
how she became the monster, quote unquote, that
Mm-hmm.
we know her as. And hearing her side of the story, and it goes back to the theme of the show that they do a great job, like I've said, of weaving it throughout all the episodes of not all monsters look like monsters and not all heroes look like heroes,
Mm-hmm.
because from Medusa's point of view, Athena is the monster and Poseidon is the monster, and she's a victim and she
Yeah.
was taken advantage of by them. And from her point of view, yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we hear from Annabeth, from her mom's point of view, is that, you defiled my temple. So, of course, you're the bad guy here. And then you turn people to stone. Of course, you're the bad guy here. So, I think that is really interesting. And I think when you can have that kind of time to explain and space that out, and the show too, understanding that it's going to be kids and their parents watching, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to the book, which is very much like, if you're not 12, you might think that it's a kid's book or it's kind of lame. Like,
Right.
who the product is being made for, I think also has an impact, because the book doesn't cover that story. It doesn't talk about Medusa's side and how how her and Poseidon's relationship was and how her relationship with Athena was.
Mhm.
It's just she's a monster, she's bad, we got to chop her head off.
Right.
And so for kids, that makes sense. But then for the show, for kids and teenagers and adults,
Mhm.
like, yeah, we can go a little bit deeper and we can talk about these other topics.
Right. And not only is it the kids and the parents, like the parents watching with the kids, but it's the parents are the ones that read this book in 2005, and now it's 2025 and it's 20 years later. Now we have kids and we are introducing our kids to it. So they are needing to market this towards the 12-year-olds that are watching this for the
Hmm.
first time, and this show is introducing them to Percy Jackson, but they also need to capture our attention and
Yeah,
keep us adults interested in the story as well.
absolutely. Yeah.
But I really did enjoy the Medusa scene in the show, and I thought the actress that played her, and I'm sorry I didn't write down her name because we didn't talk about her in the last episode, but I thought that she did a really good job playing Medusa, and especially with that, you know, having her side of the story be told, I thought she did a really good job with that.
Yeah, she had the perfect balance, I think, of being a sympathetic character where you felt
Mhm.
bad for her and you kind of wanted her to succeed. And you kind of were like,
Yeah.
yeah, Percy, if you want to hang out with her, like, I don't blame you. Like, she's just going through it out here.
Yeah.
Um, and then still being like, oh, she could still do some damage and she's still dangerous, even
Yeah.
though we feel bad for her. So I thought the actress did a great job. Yeah.
Yeah. So our next monster of the week is Echidna. We have gone
Hmm.
to St. Louis and we have the St. Louis Arch, and there's a big battle. There's also the Chimera, which is introduced on the train and then follows him into the arch, which I think is a little different from the book to the show. This is completely cut from the film. There's no Chimera, there's no Echidna.
Yeah, it's cut and replaced. The whole like plot line of trying to get west is changed by they're trying to find these pearls.
Yes.
And the pearls are each located in a different place. One of them was with Medusa. The next one is at the um, Parthenon in Nashville.
Mhm.
And in the film, they fight a Hydra.
Hydra.
Hydra does not happen in the book. In the
Right.
book, it's like you said, they keep going and they're on the train and they're in St. Louis and it's Echidna and Chimera. So in the book, they get off the train just because it's a layover, like the train's refueling or whatever, and they just have a couple of hours. So what are we going to do for a couple hours? Well, Annabeth wants to be an architect. She's a child of Athena. She has the brain for
Mhm.
it. She wants to be an architect, and the St. Louis Arch is right there. Of course, she wants to go see it. So they go, and as they go up to the top of the arch, Echidna and Chimera like reveal themselves to the kids, and Percy is left behind just because he doesn't fit in the elevator to get down.
Mhm.
And that's how they attack Percy. And then in the show, they changed it, which follows the theme, monsters not being monsters and all that, like we've said. And so they get off the train because Echidna and Chimera reveal themselves and they have to get off to escape. And then there's the whole really interesting change that they made about the arch being a secret temple to Athena
Right.
and being able to offer protection for the demigods. And then because they sent Medusa's head to Olympus, Athena's embarrassed and is punishing Annabeth and lets the monsters in to attack them. And that's how we get
Mm.
up the arch. We're trying to escape.
Mhm.
So that little plot line is not from the book. But again, in the context of the show and the themes that the show is trying to express, it makes sense and it's really well written and it is acted beautifully by Leah, like the hurt and heartbreak of her
Yes.
mom being disappointed in her and punishing
Yes.
her the same way that she punished Medusa, when Medusa did something wrong, um, was really, really well done, really interesting take on that scene and Annabeth's relationship with Athena, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good points. So after the St. Louis Arch, Percy, he falls into the water, and he's given a message. And then we make our way to the Lotus Casino, where they end up realizing they've actually spent days there once they come out of their haze. Um, which we do get this event happening in the film. It's a little over the top, in my opinion. But talk to me about your thoughts on how this was portrayed in both the film and the show.
Yeah, in the film, I think, we talked last week about the characters being aged up and the film being aged up. And I think the casino scene is probably where I felt it the most
Mhm.
because there's, girls in certain types of outfits and dancing, and there's gambling happening everywhere, and they are drugged, like they eat the lotus flowers, and all of a sudden Lady Gaga is playing in the background, and they're like, woo, this is great, everything is so fun and exciting. And in the book, they just walk in and are immediately like, hey, here's a room key, here's, a key to swipe for food and for games. Like, it's all unlimited, it's all free. Like, just have at it. And they go up and they shower because they've been on the road for days and they're
Mhm.
gross and tired. And then they go on the water slide, and it's more of like an arcade setting
Right. Mhm.
in the book, and it's very much child friendly and like to get kids in and to get kids to want to stay, versus the movie is like, no, this is just a regular casino,
Mhm.
and there's just regular Vegas casino people here, and partying and like that. So very different. But the story of the Lotus Eaters from the Odyssey is not mentioned in the book at all. I think they kind of put two and two together after the fact,
Sure.
but it's not introduced in the and like it's not described before they get into it the way it is in the film and in the show. Especially, they go in, they're like, well, obviously it's the Lotus Eaters from the Odyssey, like, just don't eat anything. um which is still kind of different as well, because they don't eat anything, and then they're like, oh no, they're pumping the magic through the air. So it's like, cool, well, that explains how they still kind of forget where they're at and what their mission is, but still, like, they're not drawn in by the casino itself. There's nothing like that they're like, oh, we really want to stay here because there's games or because there's a warm bed to sleep in or
Yeah.
things like that. They just kind of, wait, what are we doing here again? um and we meet Hermes there, which
Yep.
doesn't happen anywhere else. But yeah, I think the Lotus scene in a lot of ways is really consistent through all three, but there's still quite a bit of change in there too.
Mhm. Is there anything you wanna touch on before we kind of get to the underworld and start finishing up our story?
Yeah, I wanted the whole, like, Ares and the diner scene
Oh, yes, yes. We
was
can't forget
complete.
Aries.
Yeah, my boy. Can't forget Aries. He was cut completely from the movie. They don't have that. And also the transportation. It's not a big deal, but in the movie, they steal a truck and Grover is just driving them across the country. Versus, the book and the show is really more of a, forgive the pun, it's really more of an odyssey of like, we're on a bus and then we're on a train and then we're taking a Hermes taxi
Right.
cab in the show, and it's really a struggle to travel, versus in the movie they're like, yeah, we're just gonna hop in the car and get
Mhm.
going. um but back to Aries, the I like how we were talking about the movie, you can tell that it was made in 2010 because of the soundtrack.
Right.
The show, you can really tell that it was made in 2000, in the 2020s. When Aries shows up, he's like, I'm just starting a war on Twitter. Like, so funny, so timely. It
Mhm.
makes perfect sense because of course he would, and of course that's how he would do it, because
Mhm.
we, our society, our culture, we don't just go to war the same way that we used to, when the gods were in their heyday. So
Right.
how else is the god of war going to start fights? Well, the internet, obviously. um and again, Grover's character is so different in the show versus the book because he gets left behind to stay with Ares, and he talks to him and he's kind of like manipulating the conversation to figure out, oh, Clarice was the lightning thief, which ends up not being the case. But just the fact that Grover had that opportunity to stay behind and had the, like, forgive me, but Grover's not as intelligent as like Annabeth. If they had switched it and Annabeth was having that conversation, of course, I can definitely believe that Annabeth would have gotten that information out of Ares and, twisted the conversation to get what she wanted out of him. But for Grover to be the one to do it, I was like, are you sure this is the same Grover that is supposed to be eating tin cans and enchiladas, like the way he's talked about in the book? Um, Again, I think it ultimately is, I would say it's like a net neutral in the sense that it's a negative because it's so different from the book, but it's a positive because it continues to build Grover's character and show that there's more
Right.
to him than just being the nervous, little side character and, the sidekick of Percy. So that was honestly probably the biggest difference, as well as that, and getting to meet Hephaestus and talk to him in the Thrill Ride of Love at the Waterland Park. The rest of that was pretty accurate. Interesting how they changed it, but not different enough to where I was like, what's going on? Like, I still knew what was happening, where we were. Um, but Annabeth confronting Hephaestus and having that conversation with him about, being better, and Percy's not like that. Hephaestus is like, all right, you got what you wanted, you can get out of here, leave him behind. She's like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't do that to my friends. Percy doesn't do that. We're different. We want to be better than the gods are. And him believing her and giving her and Percy that opportunity to prove themselves to be better by letting them go and saying he'll put in a good word with Athena. I loved that change. I thought that was awesome. And Hephaestus is a cool character throughout the rest of the series. And so to get him so early, I was like, yes, this is going to be awesome.
Great. Love that. Because I don't remember his character in the books so much. I mean, it's been a while since I read it's only been like over a year, but I don't remember is he the one that like has a lot to do with the maze?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's coming back to me a little bit. Um, but yeah, so I'm excited to see his character and kind of reread the books and get to know all of these characters more.
Yeah.
Okay, so are we ready for the underworld now?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, the underworld is really where Percy has the realization that he's been set up, and that Ares and, well, no, he doesn't realize Luke until he gets back to Camp Half Blood, right?
In the book, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah.
And I
So,
think all of them is pretty accurate. He doesn't figure out that it's Luke until Luke reveals himself after the
okay.
fact.
So this is just when he realizes Ares has set him up.
Yes.
hmm
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me about the film and the show.
Yeah. Um, the film doesn't touch on it. Again, they cut
Well,
Ares out.
yeah.
So there's not really much to say there. It's just they, instead of Ares, they add Persephone. They add Rosario Dawson as Persephone. And I was like, oh my, what is Ahsoka Tano doing here? What's
Right.
going on? Um, and so that, the film introducing her and her talking about how, Hades is so cruel and like, I don't want to be here. And, why she chooses to help, Percy and Annabeth and Sally get out and keeping Grover, all of that is like completely different.
Yeah.
It just
Mhm.
doesn't happen. Um, it makes sense, I guess, in the context of the movie, like how it's aged up, like we said, and like those
Right.
kind of more like adult themes. Um, I didn't like it. My biggest gripe with any book adaptation, movie, show, any property is like you already have a script written. Like just stick to it. Like
Exactly.
the book exists.
Right.
Just
It's your
make it into
blueprint.
a movie.
Yeah.
Just do what it says because the fandom's built in. The fandom loves the
Right.
book. So just do what the book says and then your fandom will give you all the money and we'll be sat in the seats and we will be there. We'll show up. And they just chose to change it and it just kind of killed it for me because they don't have the big reveal. There's no like, he doesn't have to do the work of figuring out who's actually behind it. They completely erase Percy having the prophetic dreams and hearing the voice of Kronos in his sleep. All of that is completely erased. So it's just a very cut and dry. Hades took mom, and he wants the bolt for whatever reason, and so let's just do a trade. And Percy doesn't want to do that, and Persephone takes out Hades, and that's it. And it's just kind of not as interesting to me as all the different twists and turns of like, you think it's Ares, and then in the show they add the plot point of them thinking that it's Clarice, which doesn't happen in the book. They never suspect Clarice. It's just somebody stole it. They just think that Ares stole it. They don't know that there was a demigod that, stepped in the middle. They just are like, Ares stole it, you know, who, for his reasons, he wants to start a war. He wants to enjoy that. And then because Percy's having the prophetic dreams and hearing Kronos' voice, egging him on, he's like, no, there's still something else going on here that I can't figure out. And then it's revealed that Luke was the lightning thief, and Luke took everything, got stopped by Ares. Ares took them from, and so on and so forth, the rest of the plot of the story.
Right.
But yeah, I think it was interesting that the show added the Clarice point in there, because they have talked about how demigods have to do things for the gods. The gods can't directly take each other's, powers or objects. So that did make sense, and it was good that, like, of course, the only person that Ares would ever defend is his own child. So that was a good change, I think, for the show to have made. And then, yeah, just the scenes with Hades being so different. The show did a much better job, of course. We know this. But I mean, I don't have that much more to say about it. Their movie failed and the book succeeded. And the only thing that really bothered me at the end of that scene, when they do crush the pearls to go back, is in the book, they go back to the beach of Santa Monica,
Right.
where they started. And in the show, it seems like they went back to the beach in New York, where the cabin is. And that's how they end up getting back to the other side of the country. And that's fine. It makes sense, but at first I didn't realize that they were at that beach. And I was like, how the heck does he get back to New York from California? Because one minute we're in California on the beach fighting Ares, and then the next second we're walking into the Empire State Building. Like, how did we get here?
Right.
So that change also, like, is fine, is not really consequential, but just another thing that they changed.
So yeah, we return to the beach and we go to New York to return the lightning bolt, and we are introduced to Zeus and Poseidon and some other gods. And this is all before we have our final kind of climax back at the camp. So let's talk about returning the lightning bolt.
Yeah, I mean, in the movie, they had all of the gods there. All of them were 10 feet tall. They were all like in like Greek armor. And in both the book and the show, it's just Zeus and Poseidon. And they're both in like normal mortal clothes. Like, they actually got the costuming like perfect for both of those characters in the show. Zeus is in his pinstripe suit, and Poseidon looks like he just got off the boat. Like, it's much better done. And that, final conversation with the two of them, and Percy gets to talk to his dad for the first time, and Poseidon gets to tell him, I am proud of you. Like, you really are my son, and you are a hero, and I'm proud of you, and I see you, and I'm paying attention to you. And Zeus gets to be Zeus, and I'm going to let you live, and that's your reward for bringing my master bolt back to me. And that's, yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, that's good enough, I guess.
Yeah.
And yeah, the whole plot line of Hades' helm being stolen, gets resolved by now too, and Percy gets to explain like, hey, like, this is how this all went down, and I think that Kronos is behind it. And Zeus like immediately shuts down the conversation in the book. He's like, we're not talking about this. I'm going to let you live, and you're going to leave, and you're going to be grateful. Goodbye. And he disappears. And then in the show, he is like, yeah, I already know that Kronos is on the rise. Like, duh, kid. And so I think that's an interesting change for them to have made. And I'm curious to see how that works out over the next season and the next two seasons, especially because it's still kind of like, it's kind of like Harry Potter, where, Voldemort comes back in book 4, and all of book 5 is people being like, no, he didn't, no, he didn't, no, he didn't.
Uh-huh.
And so book 2 and part of book 3 is like, no, he's not back. He's not back. Like, stop. Let the grown-ups handle this, Percy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just go back to your little camp. Versus in the show, Zeus acknowledges, like, yeah, of course Kronos is still alive. Of course he's trying to come back. Like, we're working on it. We'll get the council together and talk about it. And so I'm interested to see in future seasons how that's going to, or if that's going to shape the character actions and shape some conversations down the line.
Yeah. Do you think, based on this first season and based on fan feedback, do you think that we will stay more in line with the book, or do you think they will stray? Because in a lot of adaptations, the first, movie or season is faithful, and then later books are adapted. The later adaptations are a little bit more loose with the storyline. So, what do you think we're going to see from Percy Jackson?
I mean, I can only hope that they stay as close as possible to the books.
Mm-hmm.
I try to be understanding that, you're dealing with a different medium, and, things that make sense on the page where it's just words are really hard to do in real life with real actors and props and sets and all that. Um, so I really hope that they stick as close as possible to the book. And I hope that if they do have to make changes, that they are thoughtful about it the way that they seem to have been in this first season. This first season, they did make changes, and they were noticeable for somebody like me who's reread this book, a dozen times in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know every single thing that is not the same as the book. But like I said, rewatching it all at once, I'm like, all right, you guys kind of ate with that one. It makes sense. I understand why you did it. I follow it and end up enjoying it a lot more than I did on a first watch, and a lot more than I thought I would going into it. So if they are going to make changes, please, Ulrich, please just stay intentional, stay thoughtful,
Mm-hmm.
and stay true to who Percy is and who these characters are, because this story is really meaningful to a lot of people. And so if we just do our best to either copy it exactly or be intentional about our changes, we'll be great. And I will be
Yeah.
sat for every single episode as soon as it drops.
Okay, so I went a little off tangent, but let's come back to the story and let's wrap up the story with Luke's betrayal.
Yeah. Painful, painful, painful betrayal. It In the book, you really don't see it coming.
Mm-hmm.
They do such a good job of Luke being so nice in the beginning, and then you not really hearing from him throughout the middle of the story, to that when you get back and he betrays Percy, you're shocked. Especially the way that the scene is set up. It's the last day of camp. Percy has to decide if he's going to live at Camp Half Blood year round, or if he's going to go home to New York City and live with his mom / go to school. And he goes to the sword fighting training area just to, like, do something to ease his mind. And Luke is there, and they start training together, and Luke's like, hey, you want to go to the forest and hunt some monsters, just clear our heads. So Percy goes, and that's when Luke starts talking about, like, the gods don't treat us right, and,
Mm-hmm.
my dad doesn't care about me, and your dad doesn't care about you. and there is somebody who, you know, does care about us and would make our lives better. And then the scorpion comes out of the ground and starts crawling on Percy, and Percy's like, "Oh my gosh, you are the friend who will betray me
Yeah.
from the prophecy that we heard about in the beginning." Like,
Mhm.
he was wondering, who is it going to be? Is it going to be Annabeth? Is it going to be Grover? Who is it? And it was Luke. And that moment is so heartbreaking because, you know, and the show does it really well. You kind of understand where Luke's coming from. Like, yeah, it is really terrible that the gods don't acknowledge their kids and don't even claim them as theirs. They're just left wondering who their parent is. Like, that is really bad. And if we can change that, we should.
Mhm.
Um, and so for Percy, though, to be sitting there, you know, he doesn't want to move because there's a scorpion crawling on him. And so for him to sit there and listen to that, you know, from Luke, it hurts.
Mhm.
He's upset that his friend has betrayed him. He is fearing for his life because his life is in danger. And Luke doesn't try to persuade Percy to go with him at the end of the book the way he does at the end of the show.
Mhm.
And even the way he does at the end of the movie. The movie version, and I think Jake Abel delivered it really well, but it's very much like, I want to be in charge. I want to remake the universe in my image, in our
Mhm.
generation's image.
Mhm.
It's about power, it's about control, and, like, yes, revenge against the gods for how they treat their kids, but mostly just that, like, it's time for a new era. Um, and I think that was a poor choice from the writers and director's perspective, because that takes away the value of what Luke is saying, and that, like, he's kind of right. And then in the show, Chiron talks to Percy after the fact and is like, you know, you kind of agreed with some of what Luke said, didn't you? And Percy's like, yeah, like, things could be better. The gods could be better
Mhm.
people, better parents, you know, things could be better. And Chiron's like, you know, yeah, you're right, but Luke's way isn't the way to go about it, and Kronos's way isn't the way to go about it. And he talks, you know, in the book too, they talk about what it was like for humans under Kronos's rule the first time, and how it, you know, we were just mortals, were just being killed left and right and eaten, and it wasn't a great time for us to be alive. And so even though the gods aren't perfect, it's still better. um, and so, yeah, just Luke is such a fascinating character, and he is a villain, but he's so sympathetic, and you feel so bad for him. And especially later on in the books, learning about his mom and what happened with her, um, you really are like, "Ah, he's making some points.
Aw.
He's
Mhm.
making some points." And so I'm really excited to see his mission be portrayed, and for Charlie, who I think is going to do a great job to show why Luke is doing what he's doing, and how somebody like Kronos is able to get into his head and take
Yep.
thoughts that were already there and just, like, make them bigger and stronger and more powerful, you know. And it really does, I'm just thinking about this now, but it really does remind me of Palpatine, you know, grooming
Mhm.
Anakin, and, like,
Mhm.
maybe that darkness was already there, but it takes a dark force to, you know, elevate it and make it into what it turns into.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of other demigods that we've never seen on screen before, because they come in later books, but they, you know, they are convinced by Luke to join that side. And so now it's
Mm.
demigods fighting demigods, not just monsters. And what does that mean? And how do we handle those situations? It, you know, you grow up with Percy, and as Percy's dealing with these harder, more mature topics, the readers do too. And so I think now that there's a show that's going to be faithful and good, that show watchers will be able to do that too. So very excited.
Yeah, me too. And I'm excited because I don't remember, or I haven't gotten to some of these things that you're teasing. So I'm excited to finally get there. Um, but let's wrap up our show here. First, I want you to answer which medium told the story better, or did they both succeed in their own ways? Although we are talking about a film and a show here. So, did
Yeah.
all three succeed in their own ways?
I think I'm always going to be a book purist at heart. I'm always going to be team book over anything else, but the show is definitely head, shoulders, knees, and toes better than the movie. So the movie just it is good for what it was, but it's not my adaptation. I If given the opportunity, I'm always going to read the book rather than watch a movie or a show. But the show does a really great job, and the actors did such a great job, and Rick being involved with the writing, like you can tell, and they're really great, and I'm really excited to see how they continue on in the future for
Yeah,
sure.
me too, and I'm really, really excited that we are getting a second season soon and that they've already announced season 3, so I know that I already have 2 more books to read, so I'm really excited to see where this goes and see how, like, are we how many books are there in the original series?
In the original series, there's 5, and
Okay.
then there's a sequel series that also has 5, and then another spin-off slash sequel that has 5.
Oh, wow.
And Rick has just started another sequel series, which with like college age Percy, that I think is also projected to have 5. I think 2 of them are out right now, maybe
Okay.
3.
Yeah,
But yeah,
so
the
yeah, he's got
universe
a
is
big
big.
universe. Yeah. Well, I like to wrap up my adaptation analysis with our bookmarked moments, which our first is what do you like best about the movie or show adaptation? What is your least favorite moment of the film or show adaptation? And then what is the one moment that stands out either from the book, from the film, or from the show?
Okay. Um I'll do the movie first. My least favorite thing about the movie, besides like the whole plot being changed, is probably how they portrayed the gods. I think none of the
Mm,
gods had the power and the menace that they were supposed to.
mhm,
And so I think that, takes away from the story more, you know, even in the context, okay, that storyline is what it is, the plot is what it is. I think having Hades be Mick Jagger was a mistake. I think if they had made Hades actually scary and terrifying, that would have made it a better movie.
mhm.
My favorite thing from the movie is the soundtrack. It's 2010s bangers. It's hit after hit, and that's the most positive thing I can say about the movie. The show, honestly, and I think I mentioned this before, my least favorite thing about the show is the lighting. It's so dark in the underworld. I can't see a darn thing.
Mhm.
And it's distracting because I'm like, what's going on over here? Like, I'm squinting. I can't see anything. And my favorite thing about the show is the casting.
Mhm.
All of the characters are cast so well. Like, Walker is Percy,
Yeah.
and Leah is Annabeth, and Jason is Mr. D, and everybody is everybody, and it's perfect, and everybody is awesome. So that's probably my favorite overall thing about the show. And then my favorite moment,
And this can
oh
be
man,
of anything. So your favorite standout moment
so
of the
hard.
book, show, or film.
So hard. I think my favorite moment overall is probably in, oh my gosh. I think it might actually be all of the flashbacks of Sally and Percy in the show.
Oh.
I think the way that they did that and set up that she has kind of been training him the whole time is a change from the book, but it's really good, and like just developing that mother-son relationship further, and you know showing us why Percy is Percy and how he became Percy. And he says it. He's like, I'm not the son of Poseidon. I'm the son of Sally Jackson.
Mhm.
This woman raised me. She taught me to be who I am. She taught me to stand up for myself and to be strong. And I think that messaging of the value, kind of like Harry Potter, the value of moms and
Mhm.
the magic of motherhood and the impact that a great mom can have on their kid, and the impact that that kid that was raised well can have on the world and saving the world.
Ugh.
I love those themes. I love stories like that. So I think you pose the question, I take a long time to think about it, but I think that's probably my favorite thing is
Yeah.
Sally and Percy's
Wow.
relationship
Well,
and how the show depicts it.
as a
Yeah.
mom myself, I don't know how I can top that. So that was a really great answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And thank you, Jordyn, for joining me on this adaptation. And as season 2 kind of develops and comes out, I would love to have you back on to talk about Sea of Monsters. And we'll
Yes.
see how the show goes. But thank you again so
Yes.
much for joining me. Listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of Book Watch, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Book Watch. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of page-to-screen adaptations. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share it with your fellow book and movie lovers. If you'd prefer to watch along, you can check the show out on YouTube. You can follow the show on Instagram at Bookwatch Podcast, and you can follow me, Sarah-Daye, on Instagram at captain.mcdee. That's MCDEE. You can also join the conversation in the Book Watch Lounge on Facebook at www.facebook.com/groups/bookwatchlounge. If you would like to support the podcast, you can join the Patreon at www.patreon.com/bookwatchpodcast. Tiers start at only $4 a month, and I'd love to have you over there. If you have a favorite adaptation you'd like to cover with me, I'd love for you to apply to be on the show with the contact form on our website at www.bookwatchpodcast.com. Until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and I'll see you next week.